The air in the grand chamber of the accordance hummed with a silence so profound it felt like a pressure against the ears. It was a constructed silence, the product of gravitic dampeners and atmospheric purifiers working in perfect, soundless harmony. Here, in the heart of a nebula that painted the viewports in strokes of violet and rose, neutrality was not merely a political stance but an engineered reality. The chamber itself was a testament to this ideal. The ceiling vaulted to a height of nearly 50 meters, a dark dome speckled with fiber-optic points of light that mimicked the starfield outside, but without the chaotic smear of the nebula's dust. The floor was a seamless expanse of polished obsidian, reflecting the occupants with a dreamlike clarity. At the center of this cavernous space sat a table, not of wood or metal, but of pure, spun light, its form held stable by a localized containment field. Around it were gathered the two delegations. On one side, the humans. There were three of them. Ambassador Eva Rostova sat at the head, a woman whose age was indeterminate, her face a mask of serene composure that failed to completely hide the exhaustion etched around her eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her simple, high-collared gray tunic was devoid of any rank or adornment. To her right sat General Marcus Thorne, a man built of blocky certitudes. His uniform was the same austere gray, but his posture was a weapon in itself, rigid, unyielding, his hands clasped before him on the table of light. To her left was the youngest of the trio, a man named Dr. Aris Thorne, nephew to the general. He was the delegation's technical specialist, his fingers often twitching in the air as if manipulating a holographic interface that only he could see. Opposite them sat the Lumina. They were beings of crystalline biology, their bodies intricate lattices of silicon and carbon that shimmered and pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. They did not sit in chairs, but rested on low, resonant platforms that hummed in tune with their biofrequencies. Their leader was Xylo, an elder whose crystalline structure was clouded with the milky patina of age like ancient quartz. His light was a steady, warm gold. He was flanked by two others, their forms sharper, their light a brighter, clearer silver. And then there was Kalen. Kalen was a junior archivist, present not to negotiate but to observe and record. This was his first off-world assignment of such significance, his first direct contact with a new sentient species. To the Lumina, whose entire civilization was predicated on the gathering and preservation of knowledge, his role was as sacred as any ambassador's. He hovered slightly behind Xylo, his own internal light a soft, curious blue, his multifaceted eyes taking in every detail of the humans. He found them fascinating. Their biology was so fragile, so fluid and temporary. Their faces, mobile canvases of soft tissue, broadcasted a constant stream of information, yet they seemed to try to suppress it. It was a curious paradox. For 3 standard days, the talks had been progressing with a cautious optimism. Humanity, a species that had burst onto the galactic scene with startling speed, was petitioning for probationary membership in the Concordance of Civilized Worlds, a loose federation of several dozen species governed by principles of mutual discovery and non-aggression. Xylo's voice, when he spoke, was not a product of lungs and vocal cords, but of precisely controlled vibrations within his crystalline form, a sound like a chorus of fine glass chimes. Ambassador Rostova, we have reviewed the data you provided on your species' artistic and philosophical achievements. The sheer volume and diversity are staggering. Your capacity for symbolic thought is profound. We find the works of your Shakespeare and Bach to resonate with universal constants we have seen in only a handful of elder races. We are a species of storytellers, Elder Xylo, Rostova replied, her voice smooth and measured. It is how we make sense of the universe and our place within it. Noble endeavor, Xylo chimed. It is this capacity for self-reflection that the Concordance values most highly. It is the bedrock upon which trust is built. A pause, the resonant silence stretching. Which brings us to the final and most crucial article of the Concordance Charter, Article 7, the Covenant of Absolute Transparency. Thorne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Kalen, whose senses were attuned to the most minute shifts in energy and tension, registered it as a flicker in the room's emotional temperature. We understand its importance, Rostova said carefully. A full audit of our technological capabilities, our star charts, our resource allocation. We are prepared to provide it all. Covenant requires more, Ambassador. Xylo's resonant tones were gentle, but held an unyielding core. It requires a full, uncensored disclosure of a species' history. All of it. Every conflict, every treaty, every weapon designed, and every life taken by collective action. To join the concordance is to lay your soul bare before your neighbors, so that we may know you not just by your aspirations, but by your scars. Kalen watched Ambassador Rostova's face. For the first time, a fissure appeared in her placid exterior. It was a subtle thing, a momentary drawing of her brows, a tightening at the corners of her mouth. Elder Xylo, she began, choosing her words with the precision of a surgeon. Humanity's history is long and complex. There are chapters we are not proud of. We have warred with ourselves for millennia, over land, over faith, over ideas. We have committed atrocities against our own kind that we have spent centuries trying to atone for. We do not hide this. It is part of the story we tell ourselves. This is understood and expected, Xylo replied. Many member species have violent origins. The T-Car, for example, nearly rendered their own homeworld uninhabitable before achieving unity. Their history serves as a cautionary archive for us all. With respect, Elder, General Thorne's voice was a low rumble, a stark contrast to the Lumina's chimes. Some archives are best left sealed. Some histories are not cautionary tales. They are loaded weapons. A heavy silence descended upon the chamber. Kalen felt his own internal light flicker with apprehension. The gentle, academic curiosity of the meeting was evaporating, replaced by something cold and hard. The Covenant makes no exceptions, General, Xylo stated, his golden light seeming to intensify. Trust cannot be partial. It must be absolute, or it is meaningless. How can we welcome you as neighbors if you keep a locked room in the heart of your house? Because what's in that room, Elder, is not meant for you, Thorne countered. It's meant for the things that lurk in the dark outside the house, and it is our burden alone to carry. Tension was a physical thing now, a dissonant chord hanging in the perfect air. Rostova held up a hand, a gesture of placation towards her own general. What General Thorne means to say, she said, her voice reclaiming its smooth, diplomatic tone, is that our reticence is not born of a desire to deceive, but of a duty to protect. There are certain contingencies, strategic doctrines developed during the darkest hours of our past. They are of a nature so extreme that their very existence is a burden on our collective psyche. To share them would be to share that burden. It would be an act not of transparency, but of contamination. Kalen felt a thrill of horrified curiosity. What could a species do that was so terrible they felt the need to hide it not out of shame, but out of a fear of tainting others? The Lumina had catalogued the histories of 73 sentient species. They had records of planet crackers, of biological plagues that dissolved entire biospheres, of mimetic viruses that erased cultures. What could be worse? Contamination is a matter of perspective, Ambassador. Xylo's chimes were cooler now. To us, a hidden history is a poison. It suggests a capacity for action that you are unwilling to have judged. It suggests you hold a different set of rules for yourselves than for the rest of the galaxy. The concordance cannot abide by that. The impasse was total. For the next several hours, they circled the issue. Rostova argued for a compromise, a phased disclosure perhaps over a century. Xylo was immovable. The Covenant was the heart of the concordance. To compromise on it was to compromise on everything. Kalen watched the humans, a new, unsettling understanding dawning on him. Their politeness, their art, their philosophy, it was all a beautiful, intricate facade built on top of something else. Something they kept locked away, something they were terrified of, and even more terrified of anyone else discovering. The break came unexpectedly. A soft chime sounded from the small, featureless device on the table in front of General Thorne. It was the first unsolicited sound from the human side since the talks began. Thorne glanced at it, his face impassive. But Kalen, with his heightened senses, saw the muscles in his neck cord, the minute dilation of his pupils. He leaned over and whispered something to Ambassador Rostova. Her reaction was profound. The serene mask did not just crack, it shattered. All color drained from her face, leaving it a waxy, pallid gray. The exhaustion in her eyes became a vast, cavernous emptiness. She looked old, suddenly, ancient and fragile. She looked up at Xylo, her gaze filled with a terrible, bleak resignation. "Elder Xylo," she said, her voice a dry whisper, thin and brittle. "Circumstances have accelerated. We are no longer afforded the luxury of debate." "Has happened." Xylo's resonance was sharp with alarm. "We have just received a Priority 7 intelligence update from Sol Command," General Thorne stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "A long-range sensor network on the Perseus arm has detected a Vorlag hive fleet emergence. Sublight, but accelerating rapidly. Estimated trajectory puts them at the Veridian colonial system in 90 standard days." The name fell into the perfect silence of the room like a shard of black glass. The Vorlag. Even to a sheltered archivist like Kalen, the name was a synonym for cosmic horror. They were not conquerors or empire builders. They were locusts. A non-sentient, or perhaps post-sentient, swarm intelligence that moved from star to star, consuming every scrap of biomass and inorganic material before moving on, leaving behind dead, stripped systems. They didn't communicate or negotiate. They only consumed. The Veridian system was a concordance member world, home to over 6 billion souls. Their vector, Thorne continued, his eyes locked on Xylo, is on a direct line through the Veridian system towards a region of space containing several nascent, prestellar nebulae. Nebulae rich in the heavy elements necessary for their replication cycle. Our long-term projections show that if they successfully harvest Veridian and those nebulae, their new trajectory will bring them into the Orion Spur, within range of Earth's sovereign territory. The estimated time frame is 170 years. Xylo's golden light pulsed, a slow, grim rhythm. "The Concordance fleet can be mobilized. We can mount a defense at Veridian. It will be costly, but we have held them back before." Slowly shook her head, a gesture of profound weariness. "You do not understand, Elder. Your strategy is to meet them, fight them, and hope to win a war of attrition you are destined to lose. The Vorlag do not have a home world to defend. They do not have a civilian population. They do not have morale. They are a biological equation, and the variable of their expansion is always positive. You can win 100 battles, but they only need to win the last one. Humanity has faced such an equation before. An enemy that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be contained. An enemy for whom defeat is merely a temporary setback, but for whom victory is absolute." She took a deep, shuddering breath, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the light table. "We cannot allow that equation to remain on the board. The potential threat to our home system, however distant, is unacceptable. The confirmed threat to your member world is immediate. Our hand has been forced." She looked from the general to Doctor Thorne, a silent, agonizing communication passing between them. The general gave a single, curt nod. Rostova turned back to the Lumina. Her voice was steady now, but it was the steadiness of a collapsing star, a final, terrible moment of coherence before oblivion. "Elder Xylo, on behalf of the unified government of Earth and her colonies, I must formally withdraw our petition to join the Concordance. We cannot and will not abide by the covenant of absolute transparency." She paused, her eyes seeming to look through him, into a distant, horrifying vista. "And pursuant to the Articles of Existential Security, ratified at the Treaty of Ceres, I am authorizing an immediate, preemptive strategic response." Thorne raised the communication device to his lips. His voice was as cold and empty as the space between galaxies. "Sol Command, this is General Thorne, Accordance Delegation. Authorization Code Omega Black 7. By order of Ambassador Rostova on this day, at this hour, execute the Nevermore Protocol." The words echoed in the silent chamber. Nevermore Protocol. Kalen did not understand them, but the effect on the humans was chilling. Dr. Aris Thorne, who had been silent for hours, squeezed his eyes shut and visibly trembled. General Thorne's face was granite, but a single muscle pulsed in his jaw. And Ambassador Rostova, she looked like a ghost, a woman already mourning a loss so vast it was incomprehensible. A single, tear-like drop of moisture slid down her cheek and fell onto the table of light, extinguishing a small patch of it for a second before the field emitters compensated. Xylo's form was rigid, his golden light flickering erratically. "What have you done?" his voice chimed, the harmonious tones replaced by a sharp, discordant clang. "What is this? Nevermore protocol?" Rostova did not answer immediately. She seemed to be gathering the last of her strength. She finally lifted her head, her gaze meeting Kalen's for a brief, searing moment. He saw in her eyes a shared, terrible knowledge, a sorrow that transcended species. "Nevermore protocol," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is the reason for the locked room in our house. It is the weapon we built when we stared into the abyss and saw it staring back. It is humanity's final and most unforgivable sin." She turned her haunted eyes to Xylo. "And we have just committed it again." The silence that followed was no longer peaceful or engineered. It was the silence of a tomb. Kalen felt a cold dread crystallize within him. He was an archivist. His purpose was to learn, to record, to understand. And he had a terrifying certainty that he was about to record something that would shatter the very foundation of his understanding of life, the universe, and everything in it. He wanted to flee, to shut down his senses, to unknow what he was about to learn. But his function was absolute. He had to bear witness. Xylo's form pulsed with a hard, demanding light. "Explain." Now it was not Ambassador Rostova who answered. She seemed to have expended her will in the giving of the order. She slumped slightly, a marionette with its strings cut. General Thorne remained a statue of grim duty. The task fell to the scientist, the one who understood the mechanics of the horror. Dr. Aris Thorne opened his eyes. They were red-rimmed and filled with a pain that seemed too large for his young face. He took a shaky breath and began to speak, his voice soft and academic, a horrifying counterpoint to the subject matter. "To understand the protocol," he began, his gaze fixed on a point in the middle distance, "you must first understand our history with existential threats. I'm not talking about conventional war. I'm talking about absolutes. We once faced an enemy, long before we achieved interstellar travel, a self-replicating, nanite-based weapon system that had gone rogue. It was designed for terrestrial warfare, but its programming mutated. It began converting all matter, organic and inorganic, into more of itself. A gray goo scenario. We called it the Blight." He paused, swallowing hard. "We threw everything we had at it. Nuclear weapons only provided it with more energy and raw material. Biological agents were irrelevant. We fought it for 50 years as it consumed our solar system, planet by planet, moon by moon. It was a slow, grinding apocalypse. We were losing. We were down to Earth and a few surviving habitats on Mars and Europa. We were facing total, absolute extinction." Could feel the story resonating with the Vorlag threat. A mindless, consuming force. He glanced at Xylo, whose light had steadied into a single, focused point of intense gold. "Scientists at the time," Aris continued, "working under unimaginable pressure, came to a terrible conclusion. You cannot defeat an enemy that operates as a fundamental process of physics. You cannot kill an equation. So you have to find a way to change the math." He looked at the Lumina directly now, his eyes pleading for an understanding he knew he didn't deserve. "We couldn't destroy the Blight in our present, so we had to find a way to destroy it in its past." Xylo's resonance was a low, questioning hum. "Time travel. The paradoxes are insurmountable. The energy required is astronomical." "Time travel," Aris corrected gently. "That's crude, messy. You send a man back, he steps on a butterfly, the future changes in unpredictable ways. No, this was more elegant, more absolute. We weaponized causality." Kalen felt a tremor run through his crystalline structure. Weaponized causality. The concept was philosophically obscene. Causality was the loom upon which the universe was woven. It was the if-then of existence itself. "We developed something called a chronoton resonance emitter," Aris explained, his voice becoming more technical, as if retreating into the safety of science. "It doesn't send matter or energy back in time. It sends a signal. A quantum waveform that is tuned to a specific, unique signature. In the case of the Blight, it was the unique quantum state of its core, self-replicating molecule. The emitter creates a standing wave of causality interference that propagates backwards along the target's world line." He took another breath, the words coming faster now. "Imagine time as a river. The Blight was a poison poured into that river. We couldn't filter the whole river. So we built a device that could reach upstream, to the moment the poison was created and change its chemical formula. The waveform travels back to the origin point, the laboratory, the moment of creation for the blight, and introduces a single fatal flaw. A resonance cascade that causes the core molecule to be fundamentally unstable. It collapses a nanosecond after it's formed. He fell silent. The Lumina waited. Kalen's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. Xylo's chiming voice broke the silence, filled with a dawning horror. If it collapses at the moment of its creation, then it never existed to begin with. Aris nodded, a single, jerky motion. Exactly, it doesn't just kill the enemy, it erases them. The blight never happened. The 50-year war, the trillions dead, the planets consumed, none of it occurred. The timeline resets to a state in which the threat was never born. It is undone, unmade, unwoven from the fabric of reality. Kalen felt as if the nebula outside had collapsed into his own being, a swirling chaos of disbelief and nausea. This was the locked room. This was humanity's terrible secret, not a bomb that could destroy a planet, a mechanism to rewrite reality, to edit the sacred text of what is. The name, the Nevermore Protocol, Rostova whispered, her voice a ghost in the chamber. From a line in a very old poem, a raven, a symbol of ill omen, speaking its only word. Quoth the raven, nevermore. That is what we do to our enemies. We make it so they were nevermore. The full, catastrophic weight of it settled on Kalen. The Lumina were archivists. Their entire civilization, their entire purpose, was to observe, record, and preserve the universe's story. The humans had invented a way to tear pages from that book and burn them so completely that no one would ever know they were missing. It was not genocide. Genocide was the act of ending lives. This was something infinitely worse. It was ontocide, the killing of existence itself. But Kalen found himself speaking, his own voice a discordant, high-pitched crackle of stressed crystal. The others turned to look at him. He felt Xylo's warning resonance, but he couldn't stop. If the blight never existed, then you would have no memory of it. You would have had no reason to build the emitter. The paradox? There is no paradox, Aris said, his expression one of infinite sadness. That is the most terrible part, the cost of using it. The waveform that erases the target also inoculates the activators. The minds of those who give the order and the direct lineage of the technology itself are shielded from the temporal rewrite. They are anchored outside the altered causality stream. They, and they alone, remember. They remember the war that never happened. They remember the trillions who never died. They remember the enemy that never was. He gestured to himself, to the general, to Rostova. We remember. Our government, our military, our science directorates. We carry the memory of that Holocaust. It is our burden, our punishment for using it. We have to live with the knowledge of a history that no one else shares, a horror that, for the rest of the universe, is a non-event. Puzzle pieces clicked into place in Kalen's mind with the sickening finality of a tomb door slamming shut. The exhaustion in Rostova's eyes, the general's rigid control. This was not the weight of command. It was the weight of carrying a ghost world inside them. So now, Xylo's chimes were flat, dead things, stripped of all harmony. You have done this to the Vorlag. Yes, Rostova confirmed, her voice hollow. At this moment, a chronoton resonance emitter in the Sol system is targeting the unique genetic signature of the Vorlag proto-organism. It is sending the waveform back. Oh, perhaps 300 million years, to the primordial soup on their world of origin. A single amino acid in their earliest replicator will fail to bond. Their evolutionary path will terminate before it begins. They will never crawl out of the oceans. They will never develop intelligence. They will never build ships. They will never consume Veridian. They will never threaten Earth. She looked at the Lumina, her face a mask of tragedy. In a few moments, your long-range sensors will show nothing. The Hive fleet will be gone. Your historical records of past encounters with the Vorlag will be blank. There will be a gap in your history, a ghost of a threat you once fought, but you will not know its name or its face. The 6 billion people in the Veridian system will be safe. They will never even know they were in danger. We have just saved them, and you will hate us for it forever. Then it happened. Kalen was looking at the main viewport, at the glorious swirl of the Rosetta Nebula. One moment, he knew, with the certainty of an archivist who had studied the Concordance's complete history, that a fierce battle against a ravenous swarm called the Vorlag had been fought at the edge of this very nebula 2 centuries ago. The next moment, nothing. The knowledge was gone. The name Vorlag was a nonsensical string of phonemes. The record of the battle was a void, a missing entry in the archive. He could feel the absence, a hole in the tapestry of history, a profound and unnerving wrongness. His crystalline body began to vibrate uncontrollably. A low, keening sound escaped his resonating chamber, a sound of pure, undiluted horror. The internal light that was his life force, his consciousness, flickered violently from his normal calm blue to a frantic, panicked white, then down to a dull, sickly gray. Fine hairline fractures began to appear across his polished surface, the physical manifestation of a psychic shockwave. He stumbled back from the table, away from the humans. He looked at them, and for the first time he did not see fascinating, soft-bodied aliens. He did not see potential friends or allies. He saw monsters. He saw beings who held the power to unmake creation, to commit a sin so profound that the universe itself was forbidden from remembering it. You didn't just kill them, Kalen stammered, the chimes of his voice cracking and breaking. You murdered their history. You murdered their truth. A being whose entire existence was dedicated to preserving truth, this was the ultimate violation. It was a desecration on a cosmic scale. Xylo rose from his platform, his form radiating a cold, furious light. The golden warmth was gone, replaced by the stark, sterile white of a star about to go nova. He did not look at Rostova. He looked at Kalen, his quivering, traumatized subordinate. He extended a part of his form, a crystalline tendril, and steadied the young archivist. Petition is not withdrawn, human. Xylo's voice was the sound of grinding stone. It is rejected. Your existence is a threat not to our bodies or our worlds, but to the very integrity of reality. You are not storytellers. You are editors, and you tear out the pages you do not like. He turned his gaze on Rostova, a look of utter condemnation. You asked us to trust you while hiding a power that makes a mockery of trust, of history, of life itself. You claim it is a burden, but a burden is a thing you are forced to carry. You chose to build this. You chose to use it. And you have just confirmed you will choose to use it again. He paused, and the final question fell into the chamber, heavy as a neutron star. How many times, how many ghosts do you carry? How many species have you unwritten? Ambassador Rostova met his gaze. The mask was gone. All that was left was a human woman drowning in an ocean of sorrow only she could see. Only once before, she answered, her voice raw. To survive the blight, and now this, twice. We have committed the ultimate sin twice to ensure our species sees another sunrise. Her eyes glistened. Would you not do the same for your people? If you faced an enemy that was not a who, but an it, an enemy that was simply a process of annihilation? Xylo did not answer. The question was irrelevant. The Lumina could not conceive of such a choice, because the very concept of the weapon was anathema to their being. To destroy a record was to destroy a part of the God they called universe. The concordance will be notified, Xylo stated, his voice final. Not of the Vorlag, for we no longer know who they were, but of you, of this protocol, of the power you wield. He began to turn, guiding the trembling Kalen with him. And what will you tell them? General Thorne asked, his voice rough. That we saved 6 billion of your people today. That we removed a galactic plague at the cost of our own souls. We will tell them the truth, Xylo resonated, his back to the humans. That we have encountered a species that appoints itself God, jury, and executioner of reality. A species so terrified of the dark that they have become the greater darkness themselves. He guided Kalen towards the exit of the chamber. Kalen looked back one last time. He saw the 3 humans, isolated at their table of light. The general, a pillar of terrible duty. The scientist, weeping silently for the sin he had enabled. The ambassador, a queen of a kingdom of ghosts, bearing the unbearable weight of memories that no longer belonged to this universe. They were not conquerors. They were not evil in the way he had understood the concept. They were something far more terrifying. They were survivors. They were a species that had looked into the void and, finding no savior, had built a monster to fight monsters. And in doing so, had become the one thing the galaxy could never forgive and would now forever fear. The archivist in Kalen, the part of him that still functioned, made a final, silent record. Humanity was not to be indexed under diplomacy or warfare. They required a new classification, one he did not have the words for. A classification for a species that could make the universe forget. As the great doors to the chamber slid shut, sealing the humans in with their terrible triumph, Kalen knew that the delicate peace of the galaxy, the cautious trust built over millennia, had just been rendered null and void. The Nevermore Protocol had not just erased the Vorlag. It had erased the future he had believed in, replacing it with one of profound and absolute dread. Humanity had saved a world, but in doing so, they may have just lost the universe.